country experiences like Thailand and Brazil, sharing the experience to demonstrate that compulsory licenses process is politicized in the IP field, which is key to ensure the right to health. The demand for CLs is, here's a quote, the demand for CL is a practice of citizenship that emerges to reverse a process of extreme exclusion and contributes with the development of notions of democracy and ethics. In Brazil, the fight for CL contributed with the larger agenda for health movement focused on maximizing equity inside a neoliberalized state. Indonesia experience demonstrates that the use of compulsory license and or government use should be supported with policies to encourage and promote generic producers to enter markets and to encourage drug registration. An effective automatic system of CLs would be TRIPS compliant, many developing countries issuing CL in big batches. We should move away from drug by drug, patent by patent CLs. CLs are not and should not be the last resort. That was the conclusion of day one. As you can see, a lot was food for thought came out of that. And moving into day two, we also heard in the plenary, again, 3 very powerful quotes from community activists. So you had Loon Ganti from ITPC South Asia starting by saying, you can trade whatever you want, my belt, my pants, my shoes, but you cannot trade our lives. We also heard from Enele from TAC saying we cannot isolate the struggle for access to medicine. It is not just about HIV meds, it's about each and every med that is out there. We also heard from FIFA, and she noted anger alone doesn't work. We need anger, you need anger and action. We need coordinated civil society strategy on intellectual property with funders because it's not ideal at the moment. That's the beginning of day two. Started off with a plenary on leaving TRIPS behind, understanding and resisting TRIPS plus measures. Some of the comments that came out of it included concerted push for TRIPS plus measures from developed countries like the US, EU, Japan, South Korea, and Big Pharma through FTAs, trade pressures, lobbying, and litigation. TRIPS plus is limiting medicine access. Primarily research observations have shown that FTAs hamper local and generic production. Advocacy pressure from civil society organizations is crucial. So is technical assistance like impact studies and negotiating text analysis. Civil society organizations should be involvement should be key to ensure that developing countries are able to negotiate deals with the US and EU that benefit their populations, and better multi-sectoral coordination is needed at national level. We also heard that civil society organization mobilization and advocacy on the TPP has had a tremendous impact and shown that the power of CSOs acting united and determined to push back against the strong corporate agenda. For countries already signed to TRIPS Plus, important to investigate the flexibilities available to negate additional detrimental effects on access to medicine. However, also a strong point made that it doesn't mean that we have to accept the imposition of TRIPS Plus. Advocacy should enter around not accepting or signing onto it. We had a series of roundtables, four roundtables that took place in the morning and in the afternoon. Roundtable 1 was on how LDCs make effective use of transition periods. LDCs are exempt from implementing the general provisions of TRIPS, and this is from the Articles 3, 4, and 5 until July 1st of 2021. And they are also exempt from implementing, protecting, and enforcing patents on pharmaceuticals until January 2033. Flexibilities, transition periods, and waivers are the most important policy options available to LDCs to facilitate affordable access to essential medicines. So within that, transition periods are also a critical policy instrument for stimulating local production of pharmaceuticals. There's need to develop a plan of action as civil society to utilize the transition period more aggressively. CSOs can be capacitated on IP to facilitate this advocacy work. There's need for opportunity to engage with ARIPO and OAPI to ensure and encourage local production, looking at both the supply and demand side. Encourage and advocate for governments to attain diverse TA beyond OAPI. So, sorry, I'm going too fast, and I think the translators are struggling. Sorry, there's a lot to go through, but I'll slow it down a bit. And this is to help particularly change the language. There's need to there's need for import restrictions for products which can be locally produced. LDCs should make use of the flexibilities and waivers granted to them and postpone the implementation of TRIPS. Negotiate with generic medicine manufacturers for technology transfers to enable production of medicines on patent at the level of WHO pre-qualification standards. CSOs in civil society organizations and LDCs need capacity building, technical support, and resources to engage with their governments on the use of the transition period, particularly important for countries like Bangladesh that are already major generic producers. 15 years to 2033. What is our strategy going to be going forward? Roundtable 2 was around local production of technology transfers. We heard that political will and government from support is important for the local pharma industry. Different countries have experimented with measures such as tax breaks, grants, research and development initiatives, priority review, encouraging clinical trials in country and using local producers for medicine, limiting import tariffs and taxes for APIs, etc. How generalizable is this approach? Making greater use of TRIPS flexibility. Legally, there is no limit for local production, but currently these are applied for imported products and relies on existence of local pharma. There's a call for more South-to-South collaboration, particularly to ensure that there's an exchange of expertise and technology transfer, reduce the ultra-reliance on one or two country generic powerhouses, India and China, build a front to better stand against brand pharma and create or access to new markets. And a common challenge is scale and remain economical. And this is linked to the issue of API pricing. And another common challenge is looking at how WHO pre-qualifications for generics takes too long and hinders generic companies. How suitable is this going forward? Roundtable 3 focused on pro-health, patent law reform in developing countries. For us, patent law reform clearly means pro-health patent law reform and the inclusion of all TRIPS flexibilities with the most progressive interpretation in our national and regional laws. But big pharma and developed countries are also pushing patent law reform to remove flexibilities. There's need to focus on standardization of strict patent criteria and strict laws across developing countries when talking about the quality of patents. It is important to build strong correlations with the involvement of various partners to get a political will for patent law reforms. Civil society correlations across disease areas like South Africa hugely strengthened movements and forced the response from government. Influencing decision makers and positions is key to impact on patent law reform. Improving access to funding and strengthening community mobilization for advocacy activities is key in the implementation of patent law reforms. Policy coherence is critical, not just patent law reform. competition, policy, and research and development, regulatory issues, we must also look at these, we must also look at all of these as an interlinked package. We may say that it's all technical, but everything is political. Remember, this is when working on patent, this is when we're working on patent law reform. There was a quote, sometimes it feels like TRIPS flexibilities are a bone for a dog to play with. We work to get it, to use it, and all the while the system continues to move against us. We must work on patent law reform, but keeping in mind that we do not lose sight of our goals to reclaim power. When we talk of law reform, what we are talking about is power. Law is the ordering of power, and we must dismantle the power structure of corporates in the legal structure. Communities living with HIV and breast cancer have stood up and reclaimed power, and the legal system has to reflect this. The last roundtable was around challenging unmerited patents. To ensure successful patent opposition, we must have access to clear and transparent information, create networks of collaboration, and articulate opposition with other policy measures and decisions. Focus on knowledge transfer and develop good arguments that give us the opportunity to be one strong voice. Patent opposition alert patent office to apply strict patent criteria. Oppositions on key medicines have had huge public health benefits that are clear even in economic terms. The main objective of civil society should be to eradicate IP barriers by using all the safeguards in the health system as part of national law and through promotion of local production. Over-reliance on genetic competitors to file patent oppositions or compulsory licenses is an unsustainable strategy. Sign a voluntary license after demanding a CL, withdrawal of oppositions when included in license, regardless of countries excluded, strengthen CSO work on patent oppositions and support governments in issuing CLs instead, asking them to fund or to imagine they may sustain TRIPS flexibility work is another mistake. Civil society should focus on community mobilization and advocacy to make opposition victories possible, as it helps to reinforce public awareness, pressure well-funded pharmaceutical industry lobby, convince patent offices and governments to act in the interest of people instead of profits. And the last plenary that we had for the day yesterday was around sustaining and supporting civil society work on IP. And this was really an opportunity to hear from both funders and civil society about what that actually looks like. And some of the feedback that came some of the comments that were shared was that economical crisis has forced countries to watch their money. It's a myth to say that sustainability will come through government funding. UNITAID and AIDS funds were amongst some of the donors that were present to present, and they reinforced their commitment to supporting implementation of IP interventions. And this specifically is referenced in the presentation that was made by UNITAID, citing from the Constitution, where intellectual property barriers hamper competition and price reductions. UNITAID will support the use of countries of compulsory licensing or other flexibilities under the framework of the Doha Declaration on the trade-related aspects on intellectual property rights, TRIPS agreement, and public health when applicable. We need red lines with funders. Do they tell us what to do, or do we decide for ourselves? We are speaking about TRIPS flexibilities, but what about flexibilities from funders? We've heard a few dilemmas during that presentations around the tensions between funding and fundraising and policy. What is most needed versus where we get the funding from? Where we get the funding for. Action per country, per medicine, waste of time if the systems don't change. We heard that middle-income countries are excluded based on GDP, while poverty, civil society oppression, and high disease burden continues in these countries, specifically Latin America, Russia, and Eastern Europe. And there were some key questions that were thrown out there in terms of small organizations, as small organizations are shutting down, and this is a serious matter. Can funders really support activists, or is it just big funding for big organizations? We also heard from TAC in 2013, 2014, of nearly shutting down because they were running low on big funding, for which we needed numbers and monitoring and evaluation processes. Not what we're actually supposed to be doing, not what we are actually supposed to work on. Can you ask a community person to explain a theory of change, is what we heard from NLA as he presented about the frustrations from the implementation in South Africa. For civil society, was also critical for us to answer the question of, will it take, do we need money for advocacy, or do we need to advocate for money? We heard from Solange Baptiste yesterday asking around, giving examples of how advocacy in the past has been mobilized across different parts of the world for decades, with and without money. And most importantly, and last point that was raised from yesterday, in a very powerful conclusion, was a call for all the power to the people. And this is something that we all like to really emphasize at the close of this conference, that we really bring on board civil society as part of the dialogue. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, I know it was very long, but that is the end of the different types of interventions you heard over the last 2 days. There's a lot more that came out from today, and there's a lot more to share from what came out of the 2 days, and we'll be consolidating it all to share with you. Thank you.
Good morning again. After the return to Marrakesh, live in Marrakesh, it was a long 2.5 days. It feels longer than even the 2.5 decades of trips. You heard in the past 2 days, nearly 60 speakers. You know this better. You sat through sessions packed with speakers, breaking every rule of modern conferences. But we had planned this, a little bit of tribute to mass community meetings, the way grassroots movements all met in large numbers, heard each other, whether articulate or not, whether in one language or several, those with big ideas and those with the small ones. So if we made you suffer through packed session, if you didn't get a chance to speak, it's not because we don't know of your work or your expertise. It was an attempt to bring in voices you may have never heard, to reflect the diversity of the work, to reflect the strength of the movement. There was a bubbling anger that was reflected in the first session, and it bubbled through the 2.5 days. But one person articulated anger that was reflected in, one person articulated the anger and anguish caused by the global trade rules better than any of us who claim to have worked on this field for so many years, Babalva. Babalva, Tobeka did not fight and lose. You didn't fight and lose. You won for all of us. You reminded us, Tobeka reminded us how to stand up to corporations. You showed us the false and empty approaches of patting Big Pharma on the back when they lower some prices, make some donations, or give us voluntary licenses. Enough, enough. At Babalva, it was not just the corporations and the government that failed you and Tobeka. We share a part on it. in it too. Working in our silos, distracted by funding and timesheets, chasing big numbers in big UN declarations, collecting our conferences badges as you and Tobeka and so many others watched from the sidelines. It is a mistake we must apologize for and something we must rectify immediately. The global trade rules that bind and chain us and our fates and our futures to the fate of corporations must be broken. The pedagogy that tells us that corporations must survive and prosper for us to survive and prosper must be overturned. How can we look at the stories and experiences around this room and pretend that trickle-down works, or that we must continue to speak the language of numbers and statistics and economics, with all apologize to the economics people who are in this room, of course. I do not believe that we are discussing, that what we are discussing, I do not believe that we are discussing is a radical agenda in reality. It is a realistic agenda. The experience of 2 decades of TRIPS are harsh. The flexibilities are bandages on a fundamentally flawed and broken system. We must apply those bandages over and over again, but our approach and our vision has to change. It is not an immediate fix, but as a step to a structural change. And we must reject the divide and conquer tactics of pharma. They have created a whole different class of haves and have-not, a new and perverse system of privileges. Veriano reminded us that we are citizens, not just patients. But in the new world of market interventions and market logics, we are not even that. We are now consumers and markets, a market to be profited from, a market to be divided. As we leave Marrakesh, where the global trade rules of TRIPS agreement were brought to bear on us, we must think of turning our principles into actions and work for a stronger international and national rights framework for a paradigm shift where solidarity and access to medicines is not dependent on the World Bank classification. Pharma greed is not justified in any country, high income, middle income, low income, or any disease. Mahatma Gandhi taught us that science without humanity and commerce without morality are sins. I am getting fond of this quote of his, so I will end with it as a food for thought for our strategy sessions in the afternoon. Mahatma Gandhi says, "I do not believe in the doctrine of the greatest good of the greatest number. The only real, dignified human doctrine is the greatest food for all, of all." I would like now to call on Wame Mosime.
Thank you, Othman. Ladies and gentlemen, before we end the closing session and the summit, we are proud to announce that the Global Summit on IP and Access to Medicine will be making an award in recognition this afternoon. Alia, please bring up the award. We are honored to award the Leadership Award on Intellectual Property and Access to Medicine 2018 to the Ministry of Health in Malaysia, Dr. Bari. As you all know, and we're thrilled to hear in the first session, that Malaysia announced the first ever compulsory license on the treatment for hepatitis C, for Soposvir, the famed $1,000 a pill drug sold by US MSC Gilead Sciences as Solbadi. Malaysia was faced with Gilead Science, which represents the modern pharma company. Their so-called responsible license practicing has been praised by many, and their Soposvir voluntary license covers over 100 low and low middle income countries. Hidden behind these numbers and statistics are dangerous games of haves and haves not that Gilead plays. Leaving Malaysia out of the license they engaged is a never-ending price negotiations with governments. Gilead had the upper hand in the negotiations with its patent in Malaysia. On the 20th of September, Malaysia's health minister said enough to Gilead's dangerous games by using their right under the TRIPS agreement to issue a compulsory license. And we hope other countries will do the same, or use TRIPS flexibilities and use their rights as governments to turn policies into action when faced with unjust patents and the abuse of patent monopolies, and most importantly, to place the health of their citizens over profits of corporations. In recognition of this huge step that has not only benefited Malaysia, but also several countries, we call on Dr. Barry to accept this award on behalf of the Ministry of Health of Malaysia. Thank you very much. Dr. Barry, could we invite you to share a few words, closing remarks, before we move to the next agenda item?
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. And very, very good morning to all of you, ladies and gentlemen. First and foremost, I would like to thank the International Treatment, this summit, GSIPA2M summit, for this honorable award to Malaysia. It takes no words to portray our appreciation to all of you and also to the civil societies. As I mentioned yesterday, we are facing with a lot of challenges and threats and really need the support of this summit to help us go through this challenge and make access to medicines to all the population in Malaysia specifically and globally, generally, a reality. We will not stop at just HIV drugs, hepatitis C drugs. We will move along with all of you to ensure that all medicines that is needed by our population is affordable and is accessible to all as a human rights. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Bahri, and thank you, Malaysia. So I just want to remind you that this is the closing of the summit, but civil society is invited to stay the afternoon for the strategy sessions. And now I arrive to the part that I hate most in these closing speeches, where I need to thank somebody, and I fear that I will forget somebody. I would like to thank you, all of you, really sincerely, for accepting this, to attend this summit, given the short time. But all of you are here, and it's really a pleasure to have you here. I would like to thank particularly Kajal, who has been great helping us sit in this agenda. And also Gaël Krikorian. I would like to thank my team, ITPC, for supporting me and giving me the opportunity to do this work. I thank my partners for making me this affordable campaign, for the pleasure of working with you, all of you, during the past 3 years. It's not a goodbye speech I'm saying, but this summit is a result of the work that we have been doing together for the past 3 years. And I would really like to thank our funders, UnitAid, Robert Carr, and Fund and AIDS Funds. When we planned this meeting 3 years ago, it was supposed to be a small meeting, 60 people, mainly from the 4 countries we were working with. And really, with the support of Robert Carr Fund and AIDS Fund, this enabled us to have this big summit. We would have never had this without them, so really, thank you. And I would like to thank really Halim. Halim, can you come here? Halim joined ITPC-MENA a few months ago, and I'm really proud to have him in the team. He has solutions to every problem in the world. This guy is able to take, on a Saturday night, a diplomat from the Moroccan embassy in South Africa, in Johannesburg or Pretoria, to drive on Saturday night to the airport to deblock the visa situation of a participant. He said, focus on the agenda, no worries, I'm going to solve it, and he did. So thank you, Halim, and your team. One last thing before letting Halim close the summit. You are all invited this evening to the PPP party. No patent, no problem party. So the funders, this is out of the summit. It's really an invitation of ITPC-MENA team. So Halim, you have the floor.
Thank you. Très ému, donc je vais parler en français, sinon je vais tout mélanger. Donc, j'aimerais remercier tout d'abord tous les participants. C'était un grand plaisir de vous avoir tous ici au même endroit, Marrakech. Cela témoigne de votre engagement fort sur la question de l'accès aux médicaments. C'était une surprise pour moi de vous voir tous très attentifs jusqu'à très tard le soir. Je pense que c'était vraiment le bon moment de faire ce sommet et j'espère que c'est la première édition. Donc, avis aux bailleurs. J'aimerais vraiment remercier, parce que Othman m'a remercié, mais en fait, c'est vraiment un travail d'équipe. Donc, j'appelle toute mon équipe sur scène, à Alia, parce que c'est également elle qui a débloqué les situations pour le visa. Merci d'ailleurs au MAE, ministère des Affaires étrangères français, oh là, marocain et de la coopération internationale. J'aimerais aussi que Imed vienne se joindre à nous, puisqu'il s'est occupé de tous les aspects financiers. J'aimerais également que Yahya, Zach et Youssef nous rejoignent pour tous les aspects logistiques. Voilà. Et je voudrais que vous leur fassiez un tonnerre d'applaudissements. J'aimerais évidemment remercier infiniment ITPC Global, la famille, donc aussi bien les salariés, donc Solange, Wamé, Hélène, Trissa, Alain, Elisabeth, Gemma, Erin, Jennifer, Pedro, Détric, mais aussi Angela. Également les membres du bureau qui ont fait le déplacement, Ava, Francesco. Ils nous ont fait confiance pour relever ce défi. Merci. S'il vous plaît, levez-vous. S'il vous plaît, levez-vous. En fait, c'était ITPC Global, mais c'est pas grave. ITPC Global, levez-vous, s'il vous plaît, toute la famille. ITPC Global, wake up, levanta. Maintenant, j'aimerais remercier les bailleurs, même si Othman l'a fait, mais j'insiste vraiment. Robert Carr, bien sûr. United, merci à Catherine et à Co de nous avoir honorés de leur présence. Un tonnerre d'applaudissements, s'il vous plaît. À Heads Fund, merci à Yorit de nous avoir fait confiance depuis 3 ans, parce que ce n'est pas seulement le sommet, mais aussi les activités d'ITPC-MENA. Merci pour la flexibilité, merci Yorit. Vicob, merci à Catherine et sa fabuleuse équipe qui a mis à disposition toute cette technologie pour assurer votre confort. Un grand applaudissement. Merci à Rola et ses merveilleux interprètes d'avoir assuré la traduction en 4 langues. Un grand applaudissement. Gracias, thank you, spasiba et ham kumpak. Je sais pas. Donc, j'aimerais remercier l'hôtel pour vous avoir le confort. Voilà. Merci à Dalmouha pour vous avoir permis de découvrir la gastronomie marocaine. Merci à Mohamed Smiej, ce grand artiste qui a fait don de son art, mais aussi de ses nuits et jours. Un grand merci. Merci aux photographes, merci. Toutes ces personnes nous soutiennent depuis des années et ont permis que ce sommet soit de haut niveau. Un très grand merci à ITPC-MENA, bien sûr, mais un grand merci à toutes les personnes de mon CA, mon conseil d'administration, Khadija, Othman, Nadia, Mohamed, Simo. Levez-vous, s'il vous plaît, et un grand tonnerre d'applaudissements. Non, j'ai vraiment la chance de travailler avec des personnes très investies, ce qui est rare en général dans les associations. Voilà. Évidemment, merci à Kajal, Gaël, mais également tous les speakers et modérateurs. Et j'espère n'avoir oublié personne. Et j'aime pas conclure parce qu'on va se retrouver cet après-midi, mais quand même, bon retour dans vos pays et merci pour la qualité de ce sommet et à l'année prochaine ou dans 2 ans, j'espère. Merci. Ah, une photo de...
We have 1 hour for lunch. We come here for the plenaries to explain how the breakout sessions are going to happen. So maybe 1 hour, and it's 1:30, so 2:30. And don't forget the suggestions.
Allons vers le réfectoire. Non, c'est pas grave. C'est pas grave.